lost structures of ancient civilizations. History says we know the past, but hidden beneath the ice, seas, and deserts are places that laugh at it. Cities without builders, tunnels carved into stone when it seemed there was neither technology nor reason. Structures that shouldn't support their own weight, yet still stand. In this episode, we'll descend to where the past behaves as if it were rewritten retroactively. Gebekara Subglacial Complex. In the far north of Greenland, there's a place marked on old maps with only one word: empty. For centuries, nothing lived here but wind, ice, and a silence that oppresses more than frost. But one day, while surveying the thickness of the glaciers, instruments recorded the impossible. Beneath a kilometer-thick layer of ice lay perfect angles, intersecting lines, and voids, too perfect to be natural. Thus began the story of the Gebekara Complex, a structure that shouldn't exist. Scientists expected to see layered ice, rocks, and voids carved by time, but the scanners revealed a structure resembling a multi-level city: smooth halls, straight corridors, vertical shafts, as if someone had carved them out of the mountain and then allowed the ice to slowly seal them from above. The ice here is incredibly old. So old that if the complex was indeed built by humans, the creators lived long before the advent of known civilizations. But this begs the question, who could have built such halls in a world shrouded in eternal winter? When the first research teams attempted to reach the subglacial voids, they encountered an unexpected difficulty. The ice around the complex was stronger than usual. It seemed to be changing structure, resisting drilling. Engineers attributed this to nature, but expedition members had a different story. The ice resembled compressed glass, as if it were heated from within. But what could create heat at depth, where the temperature is always below freezing? Having penetrated a little deeper, the researchers encountered their first anomaly: a perfectly vertical wall. The stone was polished to a mirror shine. Even modern tools left barely noticeable marks on it. The rock's composition differed from local minerals. It seemed to have been imported or artificially created. The wall descended tens of meters, and nearby they discovered a thin niche in which no ice had formed at all. This meant one thing: there was a heat source within, albeit a very weak one. Whatever generated it must have been working for thousands of years. Otherwise, the niche would have long since been filled with ice. As the explorers descended, the first chamber opened up before them. A vaulted ceiling, smooth platforms, and walls covered in barely perceptible lines. They didn't resemble writing or drawings, but rather diagrams. And the strangest thing, the sound in this room was unnatural. Footsteps echoed muffled, as if someone were cutting the echoes into pieces. Some expeditions later recorded strange noises, a faint vibrating hum, as if a mechanism were at work somewhere within the stone. In the second hall, well-like depressions were discovered. They extended vertically downwards, but showed no signs of water or corrosion. Air seemed to be moving within them. Warm air. But where could it come from in a place where the temperature drops below 40 degrees below zero? Scientists have been unable to explain this. One theory holds that the complex contained a ventilation system built on principles humanity is only just beginning to understand. However, who built it here and why remains a mystery. Some researchers have suggested that the complex was built as a refuge from a catastrophe, perhaps a global one, perhaps one we know nothing about. But if so, why was it abandoned? Why were no tools, bones, or traces of inhabitants found among the halls? It felt as if the complex had never been inhabited, as if it were waiting for something or someone. One of the most terrifying discoveries was made in the central shaft. At a depth of almost 200 meters, there was a circular chamber with a smooth floor. A perfect circle had been carved into its surface, with no beginning or end. Within the circle, instruments recorded a slight magnetic field deflection. Some expedition members claimed to feel a slight pressure on their temples, as if the air were becoming denser than it should be. Measurements confirmed that the air density inside the circle was indeed higher than normal, but no one understood why. Among the anomalies, rumors from pilots flying over the Gebekar region stand out. They reported rare flashes of light deep beneath the ice. They reported that compasses sometimes malfunctioned, that a faint glow like the moon's reflection in water seemed to rise above the glacier at night. But satellite images showed nothing. The icy wasteland remained desolate. Today, access to the complex is restricted, officially due to security concerns. Unofficially, no one wants Gebekar's strange behavior to become public knowledge. Too many questions remain unanswered. Why are there chambers beneath the glacier that look as if they weren't built by humans? Why is there heat within them? Why are the structures so complex that even modern engineers can't explain their purpose? One thing is certain, the Gebekar complex could not have been created by chance. It is too precise, too artificial, too deliberate. And if it was truly created before the first civilizations began building cities, then everything we know of the past is just a thin layer of ice over something much deeper. Perhaps we have found not the ruins of an ancient world, but the very first attempt by humanity, or anyone else, to survive time. Terraces of El Mirador, in the heart of the Guatemalan jungle, stands a place where nature has concealed for centuries what once belonged to the greatest of forgotten cultures. Here, amid swamps and low clouds, lie the terraces of El Mirador, a complex that seems to have emerged from the earth, but upon closer inspection reveals the impossible. These gigantic steps appear too even, too symmetrical, too precise. And the strangest thing is, they are much older than known Mayan cities. So much older that archaeologists prefer to talk about dating reassessments rather than acknowledge the obvious. Whoever built these structures lived long before those we are accustomed to considering first. The terraces stretch for many kilometers, forming not cities, but entire levels. Their surface is composed of stone blocks of identical shapes, but the stones themselves do not match the rock beneath them. They seem to have been brought from somewhere, hand-cut, and assembled in such a way that it's impossible to slip even a blade between the blocks. When researchers attempted to carefully remove one of the stones, they discovered another layer hidden beneath it, and another beneath that. And so it continues down to the depths where rocks formed by the earth itself begin. This means only one thing. The terraces were built in layers, each one created separately. Why this should be is unclear. One of the most mysterious places is a platform locals call the Shimmering One. During the day, it appears to be an ordinary part of the terraces, but at night, its surface reflects the starlight as if the stone contains invisible metallic inclusions. Scientists are certain that some of the blocks do indeed contain traces of rare minerals not found in this region. But where did they come from? And why does their presence create a reflective effect reminiscent of a faint glow? Among the terraces, there's a strange area that locals avoid. They call it the Whispering Zone. Enter it, and a gentle hum, like breathing, becomes audible. There's no source of the sound, no underground rivers, no wind, only a steady, vibrating hiss, as if the surface of the terraces were talking to itself. The surprising thing is that the hum only occurs in people. Instruments record silence. But everyone who's been there swears the sound is coming from below. Some researchers have suggested that the terraces may conceal a vast cavity, perhaps an ancient hall or system of chambers. Similar structures have been found beneath other Mayan ruins, but El Mirador is unlike any known city. There are no familiar pyramids, temples, or decorations. Everything appears to be a foundation constructed not for beauty, but for scale, as if it were a platform supporting something far heavier than typical stone structures. The strangest discovery came during excavations on one of the eastern terraces. Workers discovered a huge stone circle. Its surface was perfectly smooth, and its edges were so even that it seemed machine-cut. Within it, They found barely noticeable lines resembling star charts, but these charts didn't match any known star positions. Except for one thing, a glimpse from the depths of time into the sky as it had been thousands of years ago. Only these lines showed the star positions, which, according to calculations, corresponded to a period before the Maya existed. A hypothesis then arose. The terraces could have belonged to a culture that disappeared long before the first jungle inhabitants arrived. But who were they? Why did they leave? And why were their structures so carefully concealed by time and nature? Another detail has scientists worried. Long, polished paths have been discovered on several sections of the terraces. They don't lead to peaks or connect dwellings. They begin and end in nowhere. Their surface is too smooth, as if something had been rolled or moved across it. But what? And why don't paths make sense in conventional architecture? During their research, one of the teams accidentally discovered a series of small holes arranged in a strictly straight line. When a thin metal rod is inserted into them, it begins to vibrate, and the deeper the hole, the more intensely. There's no explanation for this. Some speculate that the terraces may have been part of a device that interacted with the ground. Perhaps it captured the vibrations, perhaps it generated them, or perhaps it amplified them. The most frightening story concerns a hall on the southern steps. A low-ceilinged room was discovered there. Inside were perfectly identical squares carved into the stone. But when researchers tried to photograph them, the images came out blurry. It could have been chalked up to humidity, if not for one fact. In their photographs, people saw figures, silhouettes, shadows. But there was no one in the room, and the instruments didn't detect any movement. Today, archaeologists continue their research, but a significant portion of the terraces have been closed to public access. The official reason is the risk of collapse. Unofficially, there are too many inconsistencies, too many questions, too many oddities. Some are convinced that the terraces are not architecture, they are a mechanism. Frozen, enormous, created not by humans and not for humans. Others believe that beneath the stone lies something hidden that no one should see. But one thing is clear. El Mirador is more than just an ancient city. It is the remains of a civilization we know nothing about. A civilization that knew how to build in ways we still cannot. A civilization that left traces capable of rewriting history. And that is precisely why its terraces are hidden so deeply in the heart of the jungle. Silver cubes of Cangadir, in the very heart of the Sahara, where the sand rises to the horizon and the sun turns the air into a shimmering mirage, lies a place unknown even to many nomads. On old French maps, this zone is marked as unsuitable, but for those rare explorers who have managed to reach it, it has become a point where conventional logic breaks down. Here, among the dunes, lie the silver cubes of Cangadir, structures so alien to the surrounding landscape that they seem to come from another era, or from another world. The first cube was discovered by a group of geographers who happened upon the area during an aerial survey of the desert. Their photographs revealed something strange, an object reflecting light so intensely that it appeared as a white spot amidst a golden sea of sand. When the expedition reached the site, they found a monolith, a perfect cube, slightly taller than a human. Its surfaces were smooth, shiny, almost mirror-like. But the metal was unknown. On-site tests yielded no results. Later, when a small fragment was chipped off and sent to a lab, analysis revealed a strange picture. The structure of the material was different, unlike any familiar alloys. The main mystery is that the cubes don't heat up. Even under the scorching sun, their surfaces remain cool. This contradicts the nature of the desert, where any metal becomes scorching hot by midday. It is this property that frightens researchers the most, because explaining this behavior is impossible without understanding the composition of the material, and its nature is still unknown. The second cube was found several weeks later, approximately 5 kilometers from the first. It was partially buried under sand, but its shape was perfectly preserved. A line, almost straight, stretched between the two cubes. Thin metal veins were discovered deep beneath the sand, as if someone had connected the cubes with a mesh. But the mesh was deeper than could be examined without specialized equipment. Instruments lowered into the sand detected faint vibrations, as if something were working deep within the earth, or sleeping. When they tried to examine the cube's surface, they found it impossible to scratch. Even a diamond blade glided past without leaving a mark. The metal wasn't hard in the conventional sense, however. It gave a slight response, as if it were hollow. However, striking it sounded dull, not like striking a hollow object, but like striking a material in which sound is absorbed by itself. There's a strange thing that researchers are reluctant to discuss. While working near the cubes, people experienced a sensation of pressure on their temples. It was as if the air around them was growing denser. Some were overcome by anxiety, sudden, unprovoked. One geologist's diary contains the following entry. When you stand next to it, it feels as if the cube is looking at you, not with its eyes, but with its presence. A month later, a third cube was found. It was half destroyed, but the surface of the debris glistened just like the others. Around it lay rocks melted from below. It looked as if the intense heat was emanating not from above, but from deep within the cube. It felt as if a process had once occurred within that we do not understand. The most terrifying discovery came later. Between the cubes, in the sand, they found a perfectly round depression, as if from a sphere that had once been there. Traces of lines extending downwards were visible at its bottom. But when the researchers tried to dig deeper, their instruments began malfunctioning. Compasses spun, metal detectors whined, equipment shut down. It was as if the ground beneath them was saturated with something. There's a theory that the cubes are part of an ancient energy system, perhaps a device that operated on principles that seem futuristic today. If so, the cubes are merely the tips, poking out to the surface. The rest is hidden deep in the desert, where layers of time lie that no one has ever explored. Local nomads tell a different legend. They say that many generations ago, there was no sand here. In the place of the desert stood cities that vanished in an instant, and that the cubes are what remains of those who lived before humans, or in place of humans. They call these objects hearts of emptiness. And they claim that at night, when the wind dies down, the cubes sing. The vibration is barely audible, but it moves through the earth like the breath of something ancient. Today, the Cangadir region is closed to free expeditions. The official reason is the danger to researchers and the unpredictable natural conditions. Unofficially, no one can explain the nature of the cubes, and any attempts to remove the larger fragments have failed. The metal seems to disintegrate into particles that disappear into the air. One thing is certain, the silver cubes of Cangadir are unlike any other structure on Earth. They defy history, physics, or common sense. And if they are truly part of something larger, then the desert conceals a mechanism that perhaps should never function again. But the question remains, is it already working? Quietly, deep beneath the sand, awaiting the moment when the desert will once again be livable? The sphere of Kailash. High in the Tibetan mountains, where the air is like glass and the silence weighs on the chest more heavily than the altitude, stands Mount Kailash. Its summit is a perfect pyramid, long considered a sacred symbol. But what lies beneath has been seen with almost no one's own eyes. Here, in the depths of the sacred rock, lies an object that leaves even those who have spent their lives studying ancient anomalies speechless. It is called the Kailash sphere, a perfectly smooth stone sphere hidden deep within the mountain as if placed there by someone's will, or by a hand. The story began when a group of researchers decided to conduct an underground scan of the rock around Kailash. They expected to see an ordinary rock mass, cracks, and voids. But the instruments revealed a huge sphere embedded in the rock. Its diameter exceeds hundreds of meters. The surface is smooth, without cracks, without signs of erosion, without any signs of natural origin. It seems as if it was not formed by nature, but created and then covered by the mountain. It sounds impossible, but the measurements confirmed one thing. The sphere is not part of the rock. It is separate. It is embedded. Who could do such a thing, and most importantly, why? At first, they thought it was a mistake, but repeated investigations yielded the same result. Then they descended deeper and found the entrance, a narrow, almost imperceptible passageway leading to a chamber where the air hung still, as if time had stood still. Below, a perfectly round surface opened up, like a gigantic polished stone dome. Standing next to it was strange. The silence seemed to vibrate. Even breathing became louder. The first thing the researchers noticed was sound, or rather the absence of sound. If you clap your hands near the sphere, the sound immediately dies away, as if absorbed by an invisible film. There's no echo inside the hall. It feels as if the sphere isn't just an object, but a mechanism that interferes with space itself. Upon touching the surface, it became clear. This was no ordinary stone. It was warm, not hot, but warm, as if something were working inside it. However, the instruments detected no heat source. There was no magnetic field, no radiation, only a slight vibration in the air, undetectable by instruments, but felt by everyone present. Monks from nearby monasteries tell a legend they rarely repeat to outsiders. They say that a round guardian sleeps within Kailash and that it knows the time. It is not revered as a deity, but rather as an ancient instrument that must not be disturbed. But no one explains what this means. And when researchers inquired about the sphere, the monks said only one thing: don't touch anything that is not made by human hands. There's another oddity. In the room where the sphere is, compasses behave erratically. They spin slowly, as if hesitant. Metal objects sometimes tremble in the hands, as if drawn to the sphere's surface. But there's no force field, at least none that can be detected. It feels as if the sphere is affecting the space around it, not the metal itself. It distorts it, subtly but constantly. Some researchers have proposed an incredible hypothesis. The Kailash sphere could be a repository, a vast container that once held an object capable of surviving any time, or it could be the object itself. Perhaps a tool left behind by an ancient civilization capable of working with stone the way we work with metal. Then the entire mountain is not just a natural formation. It is a shell, a protective layer, a repository. But there's a fact that makes this theory even more frightening. In several places on the sphere's surface, thin lines resembling mechanical joints are visible. They blend so seamlessly with the stone that they can only be seen in certain light. It seems as if the sphere is composed of parts, as if it could open. But what's inside? There's no answer. The entrance to the hall is closed. There are too many oddities, too many inexplicable things. Officially, it's for the safety of the researchers. Unofficially, no one wants to risk what might happen if the sphere really is a mechanism. Some claim to have heard a barely perceptible sound from the hall. Not a hum, not a vibration, but something like breathing. Long, even, as if the object were alive. Of course, this could be a figment of the imagination, but one thing is clear: the Kailash sphere is not just an artifact. It is an intention. Conscious, precise, terrifying. And if it truly was created by an intelligence that lived here long before the first humans, the question isn't what's hidden inside, but whether this object is biding its time, or whether it's already at work, slowly, imperceptibly, influencing the world in ways we can't yet comprehend. Stone Needles of Canare. High in the Peruvian Andes, where the air is thin and the sky seems closer than the ground beneath, lies a place the locals regard with both respect and awe. This is Canare, a plateau covered with dozens of stone needles. They stand upright, like frozen warriors, pointed, smooth, perfectly smooth. And most importantly, they are arranged as if they were constructed not by man, but by something that conceives of a scale beyond the human eye. When archaeologists first arrived here at the beginning of the last century, they assumed they were looking at burial pillars or the remains of an ancient calendar. But the more they studied, the less certain they were. The needles varied in size, but not in shape. Each was a long stone wedge with polished edges. There was not a single trace of handwork, no cuts, blows, or chips. It was as if the stones grew out of the earth themselves, taking the desired shape. But the rock itself didn't allow for this. It was a hard, dense stone, requiring incredible effort to shape. The tallest needle reaches 3 times the height of a man. The shortest is about a meter. They stand in groups, forming circles, lines, and strange patterns that can only be seen from the air. In one place, the needles form a spiral, spiraling toward the center, where a large stone disc lies. But the disc is no ordinary slab. Its surface is perfectly smooth, and along the edges, fine grooves are barely visible, as if it were rotating. But the surface is too heavy to be moved by anything natural. The more people looked at this circle, the more they realized. The needles weren't just stones. They were part of a mechanism, and perhaps a very ancient one. One of the strangest discoveries concerns the direction of the needles. Their tips seem to point toward the sky. Not toward modern stars, however, but toward those visible here many thousands of years ago. Researchers have found that if you trace the lines formed by the needles, they align with the positions of stars in constellations visible in the distant past. But the coincidence is too precise to be coincidental. Local elders said the needles remember a sky that no longer exists. This was their explanation for the unusual orientation of the stones. But how could the people who lived here many generations ago know the positions of the stars with such precision that modern instruments can barely confirm? The second mystery was the sound. The needles emit it when a strong wind blows across the plateau, a melodic, steady hum that changes depending on the direction of the wind flow. Standing among the needles feels like being inside a gigantic musical instrument. Each needle sounds unique, as if tuned to different frequencies. Some expeditions recorded this hum, but the recordings seemed fainter than in reality, as if the stones were singing only to a living person. One researcher noted that if you put your ear to the surface of the needle, you can hear an internal resonance. Very faint, but constant. The needle seems to breathe with sound, and this sound persists even in calm weather when there's no wind. It's as if something is happening inside the stone. There's a theory that the stone needles could have been part of an ancient acoustic system, perhaps a structure that allowed sound to be amplified or transmitted over long distances. Similar phenomena have been observed in Peru, but nowhere else have they been so precise and extensive. But the strangest thing isn't the shape or sound, but the placement of the needles. They rest on a layer of earth that's significantly older than the stones themselves. This means they weren't placed on top. They weren't transported, carved, or placed by hand. They grew, or were pressed out of the ground below. It's as if these stones weren't placed, but lifted, leveled, pulled upward, as if the earth itself had splashed them out, shaping them. This idea seems impossible. But geologists studying the soil structure have indeed found evidence of powerful pressure from below. The porous layers of earth around the needles appear to have been pushed apart. And the stones themselves have a strange base, wider than the top, as if the needles were expanding inward rather than downward. This cannot be achieved by simple cultivation. What if the needles are just the tips of a larger structure that extends deep into the earth? Some studies have shown that beneath the plateau lie enormous deep voids. They don't resemble natural caves. They're too smooth, too regular, like rooms never intended for human habitation. There have been suggestions that the needles were once part of a device that created resonance in these subterranean spaces. Perhaps it was a communication tool, perhaps a device for studying the sky, or perhaps something we can't yet imagine. Locals tell an old legend. They say that once upon a time, those who listened to the earth walked across this plateau. They would stand among the needles, place their hands on the stones, and listen to what was coming from below. The elders said that sometimes the earth's voice became too loud, and then the plateau had to be calmed. But how exactly, no one knew. One day in the middle of the last century, a group of researchers attempted an experiment. They installed a metal resonator in the center of a spiral. When the device was turned on, the air seemed to thin out. The sound it was supposed to produce died out immediately. The needles, however, began emitting a quiet tone that gradually grew louder. The expedition members felt a vibration in their chests, as if the sound were penetrating their skin. The experiment was stopped. After this incident, access to the central part of the plateau was restricted. But several years later, repeat measurements revealed that after that experiment, some of the needles had shifted their positions by fractions of a degree. The shift was so small that only instruments could detect it. But the fact remained. The stones were moving, albeit almost imperceptibly. Why? Investigators disagreed. Some said underground vibrations were the cause, but no other similar phenomena were recorded in the area. Others believed the needle system was somehow responding to external influences, perhaps sound, perhaps vibration, or perhaps even the mere presence of a human. Canare is now officially protected, but most of the plateau is closed to tourists. Officially, it's for the sake of the site's safety. Unofficially, no one wants the needles to respond again, because no one knows what exactly lies hidden in the depths beneath them. One thing is clear: the Canare stone needles are not a temple, not a calendar, not a tomb. They are a device, created by someone who heard the earth differently than we do. And the fact that it still stands suggests that its creators knew more about the world than we can imagine. Perhaps they were listening to the voice of the planet, perhaps the voice of the cosmos, or perhaps the voice of time, now barely audible, hidden in stone at the top of the world. Hedzor lunar tunnels. In the center of the Sudanese desert, where the ground is so hot that the air above the sand trembles with heat, stands a jumble of black basalt hills. Locals call this place Hedzor. For them, it's a place they don't go to without a reason, not because it's dangerous, but because it's too quiet. This silence conceals what scientists later dubbed lunar tunnels. But even that name doesn't capture how strange these structures are. It all began when geologists noticed smooth vertical cracks among the basalt columns, unlike any natural ones. They formed straight lines, as if someone had carved the rock with a giant chisel. It soon became clear these weren't cracks. They were entrances, narrow, high, leading deep into the earth. Inside, it was cool and quiet, and the surface of the walls was so smooth it seemed polished. But most importantly, the tunnels were dust-free, even after centuries, as if something within them was constantly keeping the space clean. The first tunnel turned out to be longer than the explorers expected. It extended over 1 kilometer. The floor was level, the slope uniform. There were no drawings on the walls, no tool marks, nothing that could be considered human work. And yet, every meter of the tunnel screamed, "This isn't nature. Nature doesn't do this." Soon they found a second structure. This one was wider. The ceiling rose upward, forming an arch, like the vault of an ancient temple. But unlike the temples, there was nothing here but stone. The instruments recorded strange sound behavior. Footsteps were almost inaudible. Any voice died instantly. There was no echo. Inside the tunnels, sound seemed to be swallowed up by the space, creating the sensation of standing in a room without air, although it was easy to breathe. There's a theory that the tunnels weren't built for humans. However, scientists can't explain for whom or why. Some suggest they're ancient geological faults, formed in an unusual way. But this theory is ruled out when you run your hand along the wall. The surface is smooth, almost shiny. It's as if the stone melted and then hardened. This effect can occur at temperatures that wouldn't be possible in nature here. And then strange things started happening. One of the researchers reported that, while descending deeper into the tunnel, he felt a faint vibration beneath his feet, as if the ground were alive. When he stopped, the vibration disappeared. When he continued on, it reappeared. Another expedition member noticed that the compass inside the tunnel was rotating slowly, as if something deep within was bending the direction of space. Measurements showed that the magnetic field inside was indeed changing, but so weakly that it was impossible to determine whether it was an error in the instruments or part of the structure itself. The most famous anomaly involved researchers seeing a faint blue glow deep in one tunnel. It was dim, almost misty. One of the cameras captured a glint of light, but it disappeared in subsequent frames. The expedition decided to move toward the glow, but at the next turn, the light vanished, as if it had never been there. Returning to the surface, the geologists discovered that their watches showed different amounts of elapsed time. The difference was small, but enough to raise concern. Could time really flow differently inside the tunnels? There's another oddity. The tunnels of Hedzor don't lead into nothingness. They intersect. Some converge into enormous underground chambers. These chambers are even more inexplicable than the passages themselves. The ceiling is so smooth that it seems artificial. In the centers of some chambers, round depressions have been discovered, resembling wells or places for the installation of something enormous. But there are no signs of mechanical movement. Everything is empty. Locals tell a legend that when the moon looks down on Hedzor, the earth begins to breathe. They claim that during the full moon, a barely perceptible hissing sound can be heard from some of the tunnels. It sounds like wind, but wind can't pass through dense stone. Explorers who spent the night near the entrances did indeed record a strange sound. It doesn't sound like an animal or the movement of air. Rather, it's a faint metallic hum, as if a mechanism were at work somewhere deep underground. One theory suggests that the Hedzor tunnels may have been part of an underground cooling system for an unknown heat source, perhaps an ancient power plant or an object designed to remain cool. Another theory suggests that they were passages built by a civilization that settled underground during a period of catastrophe when the surface was dangerous. But then the question arises, why are there no signs of life in the tunnels? No bones, no tools, no pottery. Only emptiness and silence. Some believe the tunnels aren't entrances, but rather exit structures, that they're designed not to allow something to enter, but to allow something to exit. In one of the tunnels, strange imprints were found on the wall, barely visible, as if someone had run a hand over the surface. But the imprints were taller than a human. Nearby stood a basalt needle, slightly darkened, as if from heat. Today, access to Hedzor is controlled. The military explains this as a defense of archaeological sites. Scientists say it's necessary to preserve this unique natural formation. But those who have been inside say something different. The tunnels are too strange, too perfect, too reminiscent of something constructed for work. And the most frightening thought is that the work may not be finished yet. The Hedzor lunar tunnels are one of those places where the Earth seems to hint that its past is much deeper than it seems, and that beneath our feet may lie the memory of a time humanity knows nothing about. Or, even more terrifying, the trace of something best left undisturbed. White Fortress of Amodari. Deep in the Indian jungle, where the humid air hangs over the ground and light barely penetrates the dense canopy, there is a place unmentioned by guidebooks or local maps. It seems cut off from time. This is Amodari, a white fortress built of stone that never darkens, never cracks, and never becomes overgrown with moss. The fortress looks as if it were built yesterday. But its age isn't the point. The point is that it's unlike any known structure. There are no doors, no windows, no passages, no stairs, just smooth walls rising to the sky. When the first explorers arrived here over a century ago, they thought they were looking at a strange natural formation. But the closer they got to the fortress, the clearer it became. The stone surface was too smooth, too even, too artificial. It reflected the light softly, like fabric rather than stone. And most importantly, there was a strange coolness within the walls, as if the fortress were breathing from within. Amodari stone is white as milk, but not marble. It can't be scratched by a knife, broken by a hammer, or heated by the sun. The alloy from which the fortress is built is not found in nature. Analysis has shown that the structure of the material resembles stone formed under enormous pressure. But pressure of this magnitude is only possible deep underground. This raises the question, how did this material end up on the surface? The fortress's shape is simple, a huge rectangular block with perfectly smooth walls. At the corners are projections resembling towers. But these towers have no openings, no loopholes, no corridors, nothing. And yet, if you stand nearby, you can feel a slight vibration in the wall, as if something is moving inside. Some researchers say it's the sound of the earth. Others say it's the echo of an unknown process that continues to this day. The strangest detail appears at night. When the moon is high, the walls of Amodari begin to glow. A faint bluish glow like the reflection of water. But there are no rivers or lakes nearby, and the glow doesn't fade as you approach. It seems to emanate from the stone itself. Some expeditions tried drilling into the wall to see what was inside, but the drill broke, leaving no trace. Then they used heavier equipment, and nothing. The fortress's material resisted. It seemed as if it wasn't designed to be penetrated. Another anomaly emerged when measuring sound. If you knock on the wall, you can hear an echo inside, a drawn-out, low sound, like a response from stone. But the resistance of the material prevents the vibration from spreading too far. The sound fades almost instantly, and yet the feeling of presence remains. Local legends say the fortress was built by those who listened to the light. It's a strange phrase, but the elders insist that Amodari's walls respond to human presence. Indeed, some explorers reported feeling a slight tingling sensation in their hands when touching the surface. Not pain, but rather a sensation as if their skin were responding to an invisible current. At the beginning of the last century, a scientist decided to conduct an experiment. He brought powerful lamps and directed their beams at the fortress wall. Then something happened that still sparks debate. The stone began to change color, from white to silver, then to a bluish tint, and only returned to its original state after a few minutes. There is no explanation for this. A material that doesn't respond to heat, cold, or pressure suddenly responded to light. But that wasn't the only reaction. After the experiment, the measuring instruments began to record a faint pulse, like a heartbeat. It was very quiet, barely perceptible, but repeated precisely every few seconds, as if there was a mechanism inside the fortress that responded to external influences. Then a theory emerged. Amodari isn't a fortress. It's a container, perhaps a storage facility, or a shell for something that shouldn't come into contact with the outside world. Considering the unyielding material, the lack of entrances, and its reactivity to light, this theory sounds less and less far-fetched. One day, researchers placed powerful microphones nearby. They detected a sound deep within the wall. It was very faint, like breathing, or like the movement of a siren in a pipe. But there were no pipes there, and they couldn't find the source of the sound. Then something happened, causing access to Amodari to be restricted. During routine measurements, one of the walls began emitting a prolonged hum. It was quiet, but so low that the vibrations could be felt in the legs. The hum continued for several seconds, then disappeared. The instruments detected a change in the air density around the fortress. It had become higher than normal. It felt as if the space around the object had momentarily shifted. After this, the authorities closed access, citing the threat of collapse. But the fortress, as we know, will not collapse. It has survived rains, earthquakes, and time. It does not change. It waits. Some believe that Amodari contains something created by a civilization that vanished long before the first cities arose. a civilization that understood the properties of light, sound, and materials far better than we do. Perhaps hidden within is a mechanism, device, or artifact not intended for human observation. But there's another theory, a far more disturbing one. Amodari isn't a storage facility. It's a lighthouse, and the wall's material is needed to prevent the signal emanating from within from escaping, or, conversely, to prevent it from escaping. For now, the fortress remains silent. But if one day its glow brightens or the walls respond to the light again, it will mean whoever built it left behind more than just a structure. They left behind an intention, and that intention has not yet spoken its last word. Morisu Platform. On one of Japan's offshore islands, lost amid damp mists and rocky shores, there's a place rarely spoken of, even by the locals. Not because they're afraid, but because no one understands what it is. This is Morisu, a platform of octagonal stone slabs, laid with a precision impossible with ancient tools. It seems to have appeared here not gradually, but all at once, as a single monolith, laid by a hand with a far deeper understanding of geometry than the people of its time. The most impressive thing is its scale. The platform occupies an area comparable to a small city. Its shape is a perfect octagon, each corner oriented in strictly defined directions, not to the cardinal points as one might think, but to points that coincide with the positions of certain stars in the sky several thousand years ago. But even more astonishing is that the stone slabs themselves seem to have been cut to the same size. They fit together perfectly. Not a single gap, not a single shift. Even after centuries, the surface of these slabs is smooth, but not slippery. It seems to be covered with a fine mesh of barely noticeable lines, millimeter-thick paths intersecting at odd angles. If you run your finger along one of them, you feel a faint vibration coursing beneath your skin. Not pain, not an electric current. Simply an almost imperceptible impulse, as if the slab were alive. Some expeditions that have conducted measurements claim these lines have a weak electromagnetic background. However, its source has not been found. There's another peculiarity, too. When you stand in the center of the platform, the surrounding sound seems to thicken. A whisper spoken at the other end of the platform is clearly audible, but footsteps vanish, as if absorbed by the slabs. It's as if the space within the octagon is designed to amplify some sounds and completely dampen others. It's similar to the acoustic technology used by modern engineers, but far more subtle, complex, and ancient. The first attempt to study the platform was made in the late 19th century when a Japanese explorer noticed unusual behavior in the water around the island. Waves seemed to disintegrate as they approached the shore, not striking the rocks, but quietly vanishing, as if dissolving. Sailing along the line of plates, he realized the platform's surface reflected vibrations in such a way that even the sea behaved unusually. But at the time, no one believed him. Only decades later did scientists confirm the plates indeed influence wave propagation. But why remains a mystery. During the excavations, something else was discovered. Beneath the platform lies a second layer, exactly the same in shape, but upside down. Deeper still, a third. And so on, until the stone gives way to the island's natural bedrock. This means only one thing. The platform was built in layers, each layer a perfect duplicate of the previous one. And all this was done by hand, or with the help of technology that could compact the stone the way we compact concrete. The elders of the nearby fishing villages tell a legend passed on only to those who show respect. It says that on this island there once stood a house of heaven. It was built by those who came neither by sea nor by land. They knew how to compel the stones to obey their will. And when they were finished, they created a platform to remember the way back. But one day, the house disappeared. But the platform remained. The first serious study of the surface revealed something odd. The slabs were composed of a stone not found on the island. It's denser than basalt, but lighter than granite. Its structure resembles a fusion of minerals, melted and recombined under immense pressure. But such a process is not produced by nature. And so the question arose, if the material was imported, then where did it come from? The most intriguing discovery was made in the center of the platform. Beneath the top layer of slabs lay a smaller, round slab. It was so firmly secured that it seemed like a lid. When they attempted to lift it, they discovered a void beneath. Not a cave, not a tunnel, but a perfectly circular chamber descending downwards. Its walls were smooth as glass, but sound died away within it, as instantly as in underground structures found in other parts of the world. There were no objects or drawings in the chamber, only smooth walls, and a feeling that something was missing. Some researchers believe this could have been the foundation of an ancient device, perhaps a device that interacted with the sky. People standing on the platform on certain nights noticed that some stars were reflected in the slabs, even though there was no water on the surface. This reflection wasn't mirror-like, but slightly cloudy, but clearly visible. Locals call this effect star touch. They say the platform shows the sky that was and the sky that will be. There's speculation that Morassuq functioned as a gigantic astronomical system. But unlike the stone circles of other cultures, which observed the movements of the sun and moon, this platform seemed to track something else. Perhaps stars in specific constellations. Perhaps points that changed position too slowly to be visible to the naked eye. One night, during observations, something strange happened. One of the slabs began emitting a sound, a very quiet, low, trembling sound. It was so faint that it could only be heard by pressing an ear to the surface. But it was there. Researchers recorded the vibration, but analysis revealed nothing. The frequency didn't match wind, water movement, or earthquakes. It was as if the sound was coming from deep within the stone, or from deep within the platform. After this incident, the Morassuq area was partially closed. Officially, it was to preserve the historical heritage. Unofficially, no one wants the slabs to start vibrating again, because no one knows what exactly activates the platform or what will happen if it turns on completely. There's a theory that even scientists are terrified of. The platform is an antenna, but not for receiving, for transmitting. And the fact that it's pointed not at the sun or the moon, but at ancient stars, means it could have been part of a communication system created by a civilization whose history has been erased by time. If so, then Morassuq is more than just an archaeological site. It's a message, and perhaps it's still waiting for a response. Or maybe the answer is already coming. We just haven't realized yet that we need to listen, not to our ears, but to the stone. Hanging discs of Nimrud. In the Iraqi desert, where antiquity is felt in every gust of dry wind, stands a city known to archaeologists worldwide, Nimrud. Its ruins recall kings, wars, and the erosion of time. But there's a part of this place that's rarely discussed openly. On old maps, it's marked as the Southern Hill Plateau. On newer ones, it's a restricted area. And for the few who have seen it with their own eyes, it's known by a name that sounds like a legend, the Hanging Discs of Nimrud. Initially, the object was thought to be an ordinary terrace, a platform made of centuries-old stones. But one night, a guard noticed a strange glow. It was faint and silvery, as if the moon was reflected not on stone, but on metal. It later turned out to be no optical illusion. On the plateau's surface were round discs, perfectly smooth like metal plates. But the strangest thing was their arrangement. The discs hung above the ground, not high, just a finger's width. But there they were, unsupported, unattached, as if ignoring their own weight. When the researchers first approached, they saw that the discs weren't touching the rock. A thin, dark line remained between the platform's surface and the disc's lower edge. Not air, not shadow, but a kind of void. If they placed their finger there, it felt cold, as if touching ice. But the desert surface itself was scorching hot at that moment. The discs varied in size, from those small enough to fit in the palm of a hand to ones nearly a meter wide. All were perfectly smooth, reflecting light so evenly that one could see oneself on their surface with the clarity of a mirror. But the material wasn't metal. Analysis revealed the structure was too dense to be natural and too stable to be man-made. Stone, metal, alloy, none of the above descriptions fit. The strangest thing was that the discs couldn't be moved. Not by hand, not by tools, not even by heavy machinery. They seemed to be held in place by an invisible force. But they weren't firmly attached. If you passed your hand over them, you could feel a vibration, a very faint, low vibration, as if a mechanism were working somewhere deep underground. One day, researchers noticed that the discs sometimes changed positions, not abruptly, not quickly. But in the morning, one might be slightly to the left, then at night. During the day, it seemed as if nothing was happening. But overnight, their positions shifted by fractions of a degree, creating new geometric patterns. It was like the movement of celestial bodies, only set in stone. One expedition set up cameras to record the movement. But the recordings were strange. When the disc was supposed to move, the image blurred. It was as if the space around the plate was distorted. Only a second later did the image recover, and the disc was already in its new position. There's a theory that the discs respond to the Earth's magnetic field, but measurements have shown no anomalies nearby. Other researchers have suggested an ancient mechanism linked to the stars. Indeed, on certain nights, when the sky above Nimrud is clear, the discs reflect the stars as if they were maps. But these maps aren't of the present-day sky. They're of what it was like thousands of years ago. The alignments are so precise that it seems as if the discs are synchronized with the movements of celestial bodies. But why? And who could have created a mechanism that tracks the changing patterns of stars over centuries? There's a story that locals eagerly recount. It sounds like a parable. The discs are the eyes of someone who looks at the sky, eyes that never close. And although it's just a legend, it's eerily accurate in describing the object's behavior. When clouds pass over the desert, the silvery discs dim. When the sky opens, they glow brighter, as if they're reacting to light. But not sunlight, starlight. During one of their night expeditions, the researchers noticed that when a person stood near a large disk, the vibrations beneath their fingers intensified. It was as if the disk sensed its presence. Then one of the scientists tried to make a loud sound. The disk responded. It emitted a quiet, low tone, so quiet that it could have been mistaken for a vibration of the air. But the sound was there, and the instruments recorded it. This tone matched a frequency that only artificial resonators can produce. But how and why it arose, no one understood. When they tried to record vibrations from several disks simultaneously, it turned out that each one sounded at its own unique frequency. When combined, they produced a semblance of a melody. But the melody was strange, as if too complex for the human ear, or not intended for humans. Since then, access to the platform has been restricted, officially to prevent the destruction of the monument. Unofficially, there are too many unidentified phenomena, too many unanswered questions. Some theorize that the discs are part of a navigation system, perhaps a tool for ancient travelers who navigated not by the sun and moon, but by the stars. Another theory is that they are a communication mechanism directed upward toward the night sky. There's even a suggestion that the discs are just the visible part of something much larger, hidden deep underground. But there's a thought that researchers only whisper. The discs don't just work, they wait, as if their creators hoped that one day someone would understand their language again, hear their sound again, and once again read the star maps they draw in the night. This means the mystery of Nimrud isn't just a matter of the past, it's a matter of the future. And if the discs are still moving, even if imperceptibly, that means the mechanism hasn't stopped yet. It's waiting for a moment that may not yet have arrived. Underwater halls of Charistos, Off the coast of Greece, where the water turns deep blue and deep currents seem to carry the whispers of a distant past, there's a place fishermen talk about in hushed tones. East of the city of Charistos, among underwater gorges and rocky ridges, lie chambers whose origins defy explanation by either logic or history. They're located at depths where light barely penetrates, yet their walls glimmer as if reflecting the moon. And everyone who's seen them on underwater drone screens says the same thing. These aren't the ruins of a city. This is something else. Too smooth, too precise, too ancient. The story began when a group of divers were exploring the nearby underwater cliffs. They were searching for sunken ships, but they discovered a strange, straight corridor leading off into the darkness. Its walls were perfectly smooth, as if carved with giant knives. No cracks, no vegetation. The corridor led to a hall, enormous, circular, with a vaulted ceiling. Spiral-like patterns were visible on the floor, but most importantly, it was quiet underwater. Incredibly quiet. The silence seemed thick, like fabric. Even the drone's engine sound faded instantly, leaving no echo. It was later discovered that there were several halls. They were connected by long passages, forming a structure reminiscent of a labyrinth. But this labyrinth is unlike those built by ancient peoples. It is composed of enormous, smooth monoliths, each of which would weigh tens of tons on the surface. The stones were packed so tightly that not even a knife could fit between them. And all of this was located underwater at a depth where the pressure is sufficient to compress metal. How could a man build such a thing in an era when there were no mechanisms or technologies for working at sea? The scientists quickly noticed another oddity. Lines were visible on the walls of the halls. They weren't inscriptions, but rather diagrams. The lines formed figures reminiscent of maps. But these maps weren't earthly. They depicted shapes similar to the outlines of star groups, except they corresponded to the positions of the stars that existed many thousands of years ago, long before the first written language emerged. Why were the sky maps underwater? There's a theory that the halls of Charistos were built by a civilization whose culture was steeped in astronomy. Perhaps they were creating a model of the sky. Perhaps these halls were an observatory, not a land-based one, but an underwater one. But that raises the question, why would they submerge an observatory to a depth where neither the sun nor the stars are visible? Some researchers believe the halls were never underwater, that they were once part of an island complex that stood on the surface. And then something happened, a catastrophe that caused the land to subside. But the problem is that even if this is true, the halls are too ancient. They predate the known cultures that lived on these shores, predate the first cities, predate the pyramids. One of the most terrifying finds was a stone pedestal in the central hall, round, perfectly polished. If you ran your hand over the surface, it remained dry, even underwater. Impossible, but video footage confirms it. The pedestal seemed to repel water. It looked like the base for a long-vanished device. The surface vibrated slightly, as if something was alive within. During one of their expeditions, the researchers noticed a faint flickering. The drone showed a bluish light appearing on the walls, deep in the hall. It moved along lines, as if something within the stone were coming to life. But as the drone approached, the light disappeared. The next recording showed another flash. No logic, no reason, as if the walls were reacting to the observer's presence. There's a legend among fishermen that near Charistos, the water sometimes sings. On calm nights, they hear a low, drawn-out hum coming from the depths. They say, "The sea remembers what sleeps within it." Scientists once recorded this sound. It resembled a distant metallic ringing, repeating at regular intervals. But when the equipment moved closer to the chambers, the sound disappeared, as if its source had retreated deeper. There's a theory that the halls are part of a vast system extending beneath the island's seafloor. Scans revealed voids arranged in a regular grid. They resembled artificial chambers rather than caves. But if the halls are merely the tip of a larger structure, what lies beneath them? And who could have built a structure of such scale? The most disturbing discovery was made relatively recently. Traces of movement were noticed on some of the floor slabs, very faint, almost imperceptible to the naked eye. A stone had shifted slightly. It was inexplicable how this could have happened under the pressure of water. It seemed as if someone or something had moved inside the hall, leaving a barely perceptible trace. But the cameras recorded nothing. Today, the underwater chambers of Charistos are closed to regular expeditions. Officially, it's due to the risk of collapse. Unofficially, those who have seen them say the chambers behave as if they weren't ruins. They were machines, dormant. But sometimes they make their presence known. Some are convinced that these are the remains of a civilization that vanished long before the known cultures of the Mediterranean. Others believe the halls are a repository of knowledge, not intended for human consumption. A more daring theory exists. They are observation points for the sky, but observation conducted not from the surface, but from the depths, using principles we haven't even begun to understand. But there's an even stranger thought. Perhaps the halls of Charistos are a tool created for communication, not between people and not across the land, but between those who lived here before and those who will one day return. And while the depths remain silent, the halls wait. Because that which can dampen sound, vibrate without reason, and reflect the old sky is rarely a simple structure. More often, it is a warning or a challenge. The sandy city of Al-Haraib. In the deserts of Jordan, where the sun melts the horizon and the wind sings the same faint melodies for thousands of years, there's a place locals call the city that doesn't exist. It doesn't appear on maps. Satellite images show only endless waves of sand. And yet sometimes, when the dunes change shape after nighttime storms, the sand recedes. Then the outlines of walls, steps, and streets appear, all of which vanish as quickly as they appeared. This is Al-Haraib, a ghost town lost beneath 40 meters of sand, as if the desert itself were trying to keep it silent. The first mention of it comes from the tales of nomads. They say that beneath the dunes lies a city that remembers what the earth is silent about. Not a single Bedouin sets up camp in this area, not because it's scary, though that exists, but because at night the sand moves. Footsteps are heard, even though no one is around. You can hear the breath of evening, which doesn't happen in the desert. And most importantly, at night you can see faint lights, as if someone were lighting lamps deep underground. When the first researchers attempted to survey the area, they immediately discovered several anomalies. The first was the shape of the dunes. They formed perfect arcs, echoing the contours of the objects hidden beneath them. The second was the temperature of the sand. In some areas it was lower than the surrounding area. It was as if there were voids underground that were not filled with heat. The third was the sound. If you tapped on the surface, some of the sand sounded dull, others sounded hollow. This is how hollow spaces are discovered. Among the rare uncovered fragments are steps. They lead downwards and end where a layer of dense sand begins. The steps are made of a stone not found in this part of the desert. Smooth, hard, with polished edges. Such stones are found in stone temples, but certainly not in a sandy depression. Remnants of a wall were found nearby, but the wall had not been eroded by time. It looked as if it had once been carefully dismantled or removed. No debris, not a single fragment that should have remained after destruction. Only an imprint, like a mold from which the actual object had been removed. The object that attracted the most interest was what sand divers call the Heart Stone. It's a circular platform with a hollow in the center. When you stand on it, you feel a slight tingling sensation in your legs, as if the stone is vibrating. Instruments have indeed detected a faint frequency emanating from the depths. It repeats every few seconds, like a slow heartbeat. But the source of the vibration is unknown. Archaeologists speculate that a large city lies beneath the sand. Perhaps temples, colonnades, squares. But there are no traces of pottery, household items, or graves. This is strange. Any civilization leaves traces behind. Al-Haraib does not. It feels as if this is not a residential city, but something else. Perhaps a ritual site, perhaps a technical structure. Some scientists cautiously suggest that the city was not built, but assembled, as if the elements were manufactured elsewhere and brought here. This would explain the smoothness of the stone and the lack of signs of processing. The most disturbing discovery occurred in the middle of the last century. After a particularly strong storm, the sand sank so deep that it revealed part of the street. That night, researchers noticed a faint light. It emanated not from above, but from below. The light was white and even, like a moonlit reflection. But there was no moon that night. When they tried to get closer, the light disappeared. Only a faint, warm trace remained on the stones, as if someone had recently held a lamp there. Legend has it that Al-Haraib is a city that sunk down. It was built not for people, but for observation. For what purpose, no one knows. But the elders say, those who lived there listened to the desert, and the desert answered them. What exactly these words mean is unknown. But the strange behavior of the sand and the vibrations of the stone make one wonder if this city was part of a larger mechanism. One expedition attempted to scan the area deeper. Then they discovered something even stranger. Beneath layers of sand lay smooth rectangular chambers. They were arranged in a grid, as if the entire city were a structure created according to a single plan, and each chamber was connected to the next by a narrow passage. But these passages were too narrow for humans and too smooth to be natural. Some believe it's a system of channels, perhaps for air movement, perhaps for transmitting vibrations. Such technologies didn't exist in ancient cultures, and yet they exist here. During one excavation, researchers came across a round wall covered in strange lines. Not writing, more like an engraving, resembling a map. But the map didn't depict the Earth. The lines resembled the outlines of celestial movements. It seemed as if someone was tracking not the position of the sun, but the movement of something large, moving very slowly across the sky. Perhaps stars, perhaps celestial objects long since vanished. Today, access to Al-Haraib is restricted. Officially, it's due to the risk of sand avalanches. Unofficially, it's because every time a sandstorm exposes part of the city, new anomalies appear within, and no one knows why they occur. There's a theory that Al-Haraib isn't a city of the past, but a city of the future, or more accurately, a structure that will begin to function when the desert completely uncovers it. And perhaps the sand concealing it isn't a coincidence. It's because the time when it should awaken is still far away. And while the wind shifts the dunes, the city sleeps, or pretends to sleep. Because the vibrations of the stone and the faint night lights speak of one thing: Al-Haraib is alive, and it awaits those who can hear its voice beneath the sand. 3 mirrors of Arcadia. In the Bulgarian mountains, amid forests that rustle the same in every era, there's a place rarely trodden by humans. Old maps call it the Valley of Mists. Locals avoid it, saying that the forest stares back there. It's here, on a small plateau hidden among the rocks, that 3 stone panels stand. They stand in a semicircle, facing east, as if awaiting the dawn. They're called the Mirrors of Arcadia. But these are more than just stones. Each panel is a smooth, polished surface, reflecting the world around it, not as it really is. But no one fully understands what it is. The first panel reflects a forest, but the reflection is outdated. The trees are thinner, younger, their crowns lower. This is how the forest looked decades ago. The second panel is the opposite. It reflects trees that aren't there. In the reflection, the forest is denser, older, darker. The third panel doesn't show a forest at all. It's an empty space, a smooth plain that was never there. And the strangest thing is that the reflection changes depending on the time of day. At night, the third panel glows with a faint silvery light, as if remembering a moonlit path no one has ever seen. Anyone who sees mirrors for the first time asks the same question: what do they reflect? The past? The future? Or a version of reality that exists only in their stone memory? When the first researchers attempted to photograph the panels, something strange occurred. The photos turned out blurry. Sometimes, instead of a reflection, there was white light. Sometimes there were shadows that weren't there in reality. But one detail was always consistent. A thin, vertical line appeared in the images, running through the center of the panel, as if the stone were made of two pieces, perfectly joined. But in person, the joint is invisible. Scientists studying the surface of the panels discovered that the stone doesn't match the local rocks. It's denser than granite, but softer than quartz. Its composition resembles glass formed under enormous pressure. In the sun, it warms up, but doesn't completely heat up. At night, it cools slightly, but doesn't become covered in dew. It's as if the panels neither absorb nor release heat. They simply exist outside the usual rules of physics. The most disturbing feature of the mirrors is sound. If you whisper near the first panel, the sound will reverberate within seconds. The echo comes not from the forest, but from the very surface of the stone. It's quiet but distinct. The second panel's echo is distorted. The voice sounds as if spoken by someone else, lower, deeper. And the third panel doesn't reflect sound at all. Near it, all you can hear is your own breathing, and even that is muffled, as if something is absorbing it. Legend has it that the mirrors of Arcadia are gateways, but not to the world of the dead, not to another dimension. Rather, they are gateways through time. 3 doors: what was, what will be, and what will never be. And they say that whoever sees their own reflection in the third panel will disappear within a year. But this is impossible to prove. No one will admit to trying to look. One day, researchers noticed another phenomenon. At dawn, when the sun was just rising, all 3 panels created a line of light that fell on the ground in front of them. But the length of these lines varied. The first was short. The second was long. The third was nearly endless, extending into the forest. Standing on this line made it hard to breathe. The air thickened, and stepping forward felt like space was pulling you back. Surface scans revealed that the panels emit a weak magnetic field, but only at dawn. During the day, it disappears. At night, it reverses direction. On certain nights, especially before a thunderstorm, the panels hum, barely audible. This sound is similar to the vibration of deep stones, the kind found deep within the earth. But the vibration comes not from below, but from within the panels. Some researchers speculate that the mirrors are part of an ancient observation device, perhaps one not designed for humans. The lines on the panels, barely visible from certain angles, resemble diagrams, but not celestial ones. They resemble trajectories. It's unclear what. The movements of the sun, the moon, the stars, or something that no longer exists. But there's a theory that's whispered. The panels are anchors of reality. 3 anchors holding the space together. If even one is removed, the space will change. The forest will change. Time will change, and the place where the panels stand will disappear along with them. In the middle of the last century, one expedition decided to test the stone structure. They installed a vibration instrument to measure the surface's response. Then something incredible happened. The third panel began to vibrate. It was barely noticeable, but enough for the instrument to register a splash. It was as if something inside the stone had awakened. But then it immediately subsided. After that, access to the site was restricted. Officially, for security reasons. Unofficially, because no one knows what will happen if the mirrors are fully activated. Local elders say, "These stones are not our creation. They stood here before humans, and they will stand here after." Their statement seems like an exaggeration, but everyone who has seen the Arcadia mirrors has left with the feeling of having touched not just an ancient structure, but something living. Something that looks into the past, the future, and the void in between, and remembers everything simultaneously. And while the panels stand in the fog and silence, they continue to reflect the world around them. But they reflect it as if they know it better than we do. Khalenru Channel, in the very heart of Yakutia, in a land that remains stony with cold for most of the year, there is a place that even local hunters avoid. They call it Khalenru, the coffin of silence. And although on the surface it appears to be just a patch of taiga hidden from the sun, beneath it lies a structure that doesn't fit into any known era or ancient construction style. It's a canal, a perfectly straight 9-kilometer-long passageway extending so deep underground that even modern instruments can't determine its endpoint. It was discovered by accident. Several shepherds noticed that in one spot the snow melted faster in winter than the surrounding area. When they peeled back the snow, a hole was revealed, the entrance to a deep crevasse. But the crevasse was too smooth, too straight. The walls were smooth, as if polished, and the air inside was warm. It was strange. In a place where the temperature drops below 40 degrees below zero, underground it was as comfortable as late spring. The first thing that caught my eye was that the channel ran perfectly straight, without a single bend. It was as if someone had used a giant chisel to cut through the monolithic rock in a single stroke. The surface of the walls showed no signs of work, no blows, no scratches. The stone was smooth and dark, almost mirror-like. When a lamp was held up to it, the light reflected unusually, leaving a faint blue glow, similar to the aurora borealis. But the lamp was warm, and the reflection was cold. The instruments recorded another anomaly. There was no echo in the canal. Any sound, whisper, footstep, blow, disappeared instantly. It was as if the walls were absorbing the vibrations. This suggested that the canal's material might not be just stone, but something artificially compacted, created to dampen sound. But who could have done this tens, perhaps hundreds of centuries ago? At a depth of several hundred meters, the researchers noticed a strange phenomenon. The temperature had risen even higher. Inexplicably, the walls emitted a subtle warmth. Not intense, just enough to keep the temperature tolerable in a place where the air should be freezing. No heat sources were detected, no radioactive background, no organic matter. Only a steady, even heat, as if the channel had been part of a system that had once been active and was still warm. And then the first real mystery occurred. At about 3 kilometers down, a faint humming sound became audible. It wasn't constant, but rhythmic, as if someone deep underground were emitting a wave of vibrations. The vibrations could even be felt in the chest. They were so even and measured that they resembled the breathing of a huge animal. But no animal could survive in such conditions, and the source of the sound was too deep. Some expedition members claimed that, if they listened closely, they could distinguish two tones, one low, the other slightly higher. It seemed as if this wasn't natural noise, but a system of signals, or perhaps an artificially created resonance. Engineers suggested that there were voids deep underground, but even if that were true, voids couldn't produce rhythmic vibrations. The deeper they descended, the stranger the space around them became. In one spot, the canal walls seemed to cause a slight visual distortion. The lamps flickered, blurring the contours. Yet there were no gases, moisture, or dust. The air remained clean and dry. At about 5 kilometers, the channel widened, forming a circular chamber. Its diameter exceeded 20 meters. Smooth vertical lines ran along the walls. Not drawings, not symbols. More like jagged marks, as if the walls had once shifted in this spot. And most disturbing, the floor of the chamber vibrated slightly. Not constantly, but intermittently, as if something deep within was being switched on. In the center of the hall was a circular recessed disc. Its surface was so smooth it seemed liquid, but underneath it was solid. It felt like a platform, part of some mechanism. Some researchers have suggested it might be a lift or a platform that once held a device that lowered deeper. When one of the participants stepped onto the disk, he felt a slight jolt, as if something had moved beneath him, but the instruments registered nothing. However, the strangest thing was yet to come. A few hours after the expedition departed, a faint heat spot was detected on the disk's surface. That is, the surface had heated up, on its own, and it was cooling slowly, as if reacting to human presence. There's a theory that the Kalen-Ru Canal is part of a gigantic underground system created by an ancient civilization we know nothing about. Perhaps it's a transport route, perhaps a ventilation shaft, perhaps a passage leading to something hidden deep beneath the permafrost. But there's a second, more frightening theory. The channel isn't a passageway, it's a conductor, a structure designed to transmit vibrations, signals, or energy from one place on Earth to another. This would explain the lack of echo, the warmth, and the vertical lines on the walls. Several years ago, the military conducted a classified study. Afterward, part of the area around the entrance was cordoned off. The official explanation was a cave-in hazard, but local residents report hearing a low rumble emanating from the ground at night, similar to what researchers once heard deep in the canal. In recent years, strange phenomena have become more frequent in the Kalen-Ru region. Compasses behave erratically. Metal objects sometimes tremble in the hands. In some places, the air becomes denser, as if the pressure were changing. But the instruments show nothing. Some hunters report seeing a faint blue glow above the ground a couple of times. It seemed like light was coming from beneath the soil. But when they got closer, the light disappeared. And after a day, the surface became cold and still again. If the channel is truly ancient, then its creators possessed knowledge we can't even imagine. And if it's still active, even faintly, then something deep within it is at work, or waiting. The Kalen-Ru Canal remains one of the North's most inscrutable mysteries. It's too smooth to be natural, too warm to be abandoned, too quiet to be empty. And if explorers ever reach the end of the canal, the only question is, are we prepared for what might lie at its summit or at its base? The city of Yamory, in the deepest reaches of the Australian bush, where the earth cracks under the eternal sun and the nights are pitch black, there is a place rarely spoken of, even by Aboriginal elders. They call it Yamory, the land that remembers too much. There are no roads, no trails, no animals, not even birds fly over this land. And only when the sun sinks low enough can you see stone silhouettes jutting out of the dry earth. These are not natural rocks. These are the walls and arches of a city that seems to have arisen all at once, without any stages of construction. The town of Yamory is striking at first glance. Its buildings are round, like giant spheres embedded in the earth. Their surfaces are smooth, as if polished by seawater, even though the ocean is thousands of kilometers away. The stone is unlike anything found in Australia. It doesn't crumble. There are no cracks, no erosion, as if time hadn't touched it at all. And most importantly, it doesn't heat up. Under the scorching bush sun, when everything around you burns your fingers, the surface of the spheres remains cool. Yamory first attracted scientific attention in the middle of the last century. An expedition studying local minerals accidentally stumbled upon a structure resembling a semidome. Hidden beneath a layer of sand was perfect geometry, smooth arcs, uniform radii, and uniform lines. When the sand was completely removed, a chamber enclosed by a spherical shell appeared before the researchers. Inside, silence reigned, as if the chamber absorbed sound. The walls, when touched, gave off a slight vibration. This vibration became the city's first mystery. It wasn't constant. Sometimes you could touch the wall and feel only coolness. Other times it was as if something was breathing inside. The vibration was barely noticeable, but regular, as if the hall were responding to the observer's presence. As they began to explore the city more deeply, it turned out that a network of rooms and tunnels was hidden underground. They were unlike any other ancient structure. The ceilings weren't vaulted or straight. They were smooth and rounded, as if the space had been deliberately shaped to avoid any corners or sharp lines. This created a strange effect. It was difficult to navigate. Go more than 5 meters and you lost your sense of direction. Even experienced explorers said that Yamori's sense of space was off. The rooms seemed larger from the inside than from the outside, and the walls sometimes seemed to change their curvature, although instruments didn't detect this. Another oddity is the air. It's cool and fresh, as if someone were purifying it. There's no dust inside the city, no living creatures, not even insects enter. The air is always the same, odorless, humidityless, heatless. It feels as if an ancient ventilation system is at work inside. But there are no openings or duct-like structures. One day, researchers noticed that some tunnels responded to sound. They amplified low frequencies, creating a booming resonance. But they didn't amplify just any frequency, only certain ones. One scientist accidentally stepped on a stone, and the sound of his footsteps seemed to travel down the tunnel, amplified many times over. A few seconds later, the sound returned from a different direction. It was as if the tunnels were part of a complex acoustic system, transmitting vibrations throughout the city. Among the many rooms, one was called Yamori's Heart. It was perfectly spherical, and in its center stood a stone column resembling a giant teardrop. The surface of the drop was smooth as glass, and if one approached it too closely, a strange sensation of heaviness arose, as if the air had become denser. Instruments recorded a barely perceptible change in pressure, but could not explain it. Occasionally, a faint hum would echo in the room, as if emanating from deep within the column. But when the researchers attempted to record it, the sound disappeared. Once a year, during the hottest months, pillars of light appear above the city. They rise above the orbs as if reflected upward and last for a few seconds. The natives say, "The city reveals itself when the earth is hot." Scientists have tried to explain this with optical effects, but the light doesn't come from the sun. It comes from below. It's as if something deep within Yamori accumulates energy and, reaching saturation point, releases it upward. The city's most terrifying feature relates to its foundation. When geologists attempted to drill a hole near one of the walls, the drill buckled as if it had struck a void. But there was no void. Beneath the surface, a space resembling a thin cavity was revealed, and beneath that, another void. This repeated itself to a depth of tens of meters. It was as if the city didn't rest on the ground, but hung suspended in the rock, held in place by an unknown structure. A theory has emerged among researchers. Yamori isn't a city. It's a shell, a layer concealing something else within. Perhaps a spherical mechanism, perhaps an ancient machine, perhaps an object intended to remain underground. Then the round shapes of the rooms and tunnels make sense. It's not architecture, it's the internal anatomy of a device hidden beneath the shell. But there's another explanation. Tribal elders say Yamori is the city of those who came on earth but departed through the sky. They claim the spheres are the remains of large circle houses that could rise into the air. What now looks like stone was once not stone, but a mechanism. Surface studies revealed something astonishing. The stone contains traces of minerals fused together at temperatures impossible to achieve naturally. It's not volcanic rock, it's not a meteorite, it's not a material known from ancient civilizations. It's an artificially created composite. The most disturbing discovery occurred quite recently. One night, while a team of researchers was conducting a laser scan of one of the spheres, a faint shimmer appeared on the surface. The laser beam wasn't reflecting as it should have. It was deflecting inward, as if the sphere were absorbing the light. Then the instruments detected something incredible. There was a cavity inside the sphere, but it wasn't empty. Inside was a perfectly shaped object resembling a nucleus. This meant one thing: the spheres weren't just walls, they were shells, and each one contained something. The next morning, the expedition discovered barely noticeable traces of heat on the surface of the same sphere, as if the object inside had warmed up slightly overnight. Yamori is closed today. The official explanation is cultural heritage protection. Unofficially, some fear the town might awaken, that the vibrations, light pillars, and strange silence aren't traces of the past. They're preparations. The city of Yamori doesn't look like ruins. It's not destroyed. It doesn't age. It doesn't forget. It looks as if it's waiting. And if there really is a core hidden beneath every building, the only question is what will happen when even one of them is activated. Yamori is silent, but silence is also an answer, especially when the earth, which remembers too much, listens to him. Ngolo Mbata Towers, deep in the dense tropical forests of the Congo, where humidity hangs in the air like a shroud and light penetrates the foliage only in streaks, lies a place known only to the elders. They speak of it reluctantly, as if afraid the forest itself might hear. This is Ngolo Mbata, an area where dozens of cylindrical towers made of basalt stand amidst the trees. The towers are unbroken, not overgrown with moss, not covered in cracks. They look as if they were built yesterday. But that's precisely the horror. No one knows who built them, and most importantly, how. Each tower is a perfect cylinder, the height of a two-story building. The walls are smooth, as if polished by water, but there are no rivers in this area. The stone is dense and dark, as if it were burned from the earth itself. But geologists claim the basalt from which the towers are constructed is not found in this region. It was imported, or was it artificially created on site? But how? When the first explorers saw the towers, they were struck by the absolute smoothness of the surface. No seams, no joints. Each tower is a single monolith, as if hewn from a single block. But the strangest thing is that you can enter the towers, and that changes everything. Inside each tower is a vertical shaft. The walls are smooth and cold, and the air is dense, as if compressed. In some towers, the air trembles faintly. In others, there is absolute silence, so profound that you can hear your own heartbeat. But the main phenomenon occurs when you bring a magnetic compass inside. The needle begins to spin, slowly, steadily, as if unable to find its direction. Scientists speculate that there's no magnetic field inside the towers. That is, the stone either blocks it or creates a countermagnetic field. But how is this possible without technology, which ancient people certainly didn't have? One day, a group of researchers decided to conduct an experiment. They lowered a metal weight on a cable down a shaft. It was supposed to hang level, subject to the force of gravity. But instead, the weight began to describe barely noticeable circles. Not chaotically, but along a smooth, precise trajectory. It was as if another field were operating inside the tower, displacing normal gravity. As the instrument sank deeper, an even stranger effect occurred. At about 6 meters, sound disappeared. All sound. Even the operating equipment became silent, as if the sound wasn't muffled but completely extinguished within the stone. Such silence is only possible in laboratories with perfect soundproofing. But here, in the heart of the jungle, the silence was created from stone thousands of years old. There's a local legend that explains the towers in its own way. Elders say Ngolo Mbata is a place where the earth listens to the sky. They say the towers weren't built by humans, but by beings who spoke to lightning and could hold thunder in their hands. It sounds like myth, but the legend contains one detail that's impossible to ignore. The elders claim there's no sky inside the towers. This accurately describes the absence of a magnetic field. But the most terrifying discovery was made by modern researchers. In one of the towers, instruments detected a low vibration that repeated at regular intervals. It didn't correspond to earthquakes, animal activity, or wind. The frequency was too stable. It was as if someone or something were still working inside the tower despite its age. In some towers, barely visible lines are visible on the walls. They don't resemble writing or drawings. They are more like traces of movement, as if the interior of the tower could rotate or shift. Yet the stone shows no signs of wear. It doesn't crack or crumble, as if the material possesses self-healing properties. During one expedition, researchers noticed that some of the towers were arranged in a distinct pattern. Viewed from above, they formed a regular polygon. In the center was an empty space. The forest obscured it, but scanning revealed a huge cavity underground. Its shape was perfectly circular. Perhaps a central chamber. Perhaps the core of the entire structure. One day, during a severe thunderstorm, an event occurred that could not be explained. Lightning struck the Ngolombata area, but instead of branching out through the trees, the bolt seemed to be drawn to one of the towers. It struck directly at its top. As it flashed across the surface, the lightning left no trace, no soot. But the air around it vibrated for several minutes. Local residents claim to have heard a low hum that night, like the singing of a stone. Researchers speculate that the towers may be an ancient energy storage system, perhaps natural, perhaps cosmic. Their cylindrical shape is ideal for resonant processes. But if the towers truly operated as a single mechanism, the question arises, what did they power, and why? There's a theory that the underground chamber is the heart of the device, and the towers are its conductors. They collected energy, electrical, magnetic, or some unknown kind, and channeled it inward. If this is true, then Ngolombata is more than just architecture. It's a power station, an ancient one, and a very complex one. But there's a theory that frightens even seasoned archaeologists. The towers are antennas, and they transmit, not receive. In that case, the Ngolombata Center isn't a camera, but a transmitter. Perhaps a message, perhaps a signal, perhaps a device that waits for certain conditions to activate. The latest expedition detected an unusual glow at the top of one of the towers. A faint, bluish glow, similar to the Kelvin glow, the same glow that materials emit when exposed to energy. But the instruments detected nothing. No electricity, no temperature, no radiation. Only light. After that, the area was closed. Officially, it was for environmental protection, but unofficially, they say no one wants the towers to sound again. Because if Ngolombata is truly an ancient mechanism, then it is too precise, too well thought out, too alive to be considered a ruin. And if it ever turns on fully, we might see for the first time what it was designed to do, or what it was meant to hold. Labyrinth of Ertalana. In central Mongolia, where the steppe seems endless and the wind changes the landscape faster than a person can walk, lies one of the strangest places in Asia, Ertalani. Many have heard of it only as stone circles overgrown with grass. But those who have been there know these are not circles, they are a labyrinth. A vast underground structure whose passages follow the line of the Draco constellation, precisely, mathematically, unerringly. It seems as if the builders navigated not by the sun or the earth, but by the sky that was here thousands of years ago. But the most mysterious thing is that parts of the underground labyrinth continue to live their own lives. Sometimes they move, sometimes they make sounds, sometimes they disappear from instrument readings as if they had never been there. The Ertalana Labyrinth was officially discovered in the middle of the last century when an archaeological expedition was exploring the burial mounds. They noticed perfectly smooth stone stripes in one area. At first glance, they looked like the remains of ancient dwellings. But when they began digging, it became clear. Something vast lay beneath the surface. The stone rings formed not circles, but spirals. The spirals were passages. The passages were corridors. The corridors formed a whole network, extending so deep that even the most modern radars barely reached the bottom. The first thing that surprised the researchers was that the walls of the underground passages weren't hand-hewn. They were fused, as if someone had used incredible heat to carve a tunnel through the dense rock. The surface of the walls was smooth, shiny, like glass. There were no scratches or tool marks, only a slight undulation reminiscent of the traces of molten rock. But where could a tool capable of melting entire layers of soil have come from? A strange effect was discovered underground. The deeper the explorers descended, the more their sense of space became distorted. Straight passages seemed crooked. Curved ones seemed straight. Sometimes the lights flickered, as if their batteries were dying. But when the instruments were brought to the surface, they worked perfectly. Something existed within the labyrinth that altered the perception of light and form. In one of the central halls was a huge, flat slab covered in fine lines. They looked like a drawing, but upon examination, they revealed that the lines followed the contours of the constellation Draco, the exact configuration that existed in the sky 14,000 years ago. Does this mean the labyrinth predates all known cultures in the region? Or did its creators know the movements of the stars centuries in advance? The most unsettling part of the labyrinth is the whispering corridors, as the archaeologists themselves called them. As you walk through them, you hear a subtle echo. Not your own footsteps, not your voice. Rather, it sounds like someone's quiet conversations. But the sound isn't fixed in one place. It wanders. Sometimes it seems like someone is walking behind you. Sometimes it seems like the sound is coming from above. But when you check, there's no one there. The instruments detect vibrations, but not sound. So there is indeed movement of air or stone in the corridors, but it's not directed toward the surface. It extends deeper into the labyrinth. But where? Deep in Ertalana, there's a place considered the epicenter of the anomalies. It's a huge, circular hall, almost perfectly spherical. The floor of the hall springs slightly, as if there's a void beneath it. When instruments are placed, they detect that beneath the sphere is more than just empty space. There's a structure there, something resembling a network of cells. And within these cells, there's heat. Very faint, but consistent. This kind of heat isn't found in natural processes. It resembles the remnants of a mechanism that once functioned for centuries. And there's another property of the labyrinth. The strangest one, some passages disappear. Not in the mystical sense, they don't vanish into thin air. But the instruments that send pulses into the depths sometimes show one result in the morning, a different one in the evening. The passages shift by centimeters, sometimes by meters. And one chamber, captured in photographs at the beginning of the expedition, was no longer found a month later. In its place was a flat surface of molten stone. Over time, researchers proposed a theory. The labyrinth is alive, not literally, but its structure is capable of changing shape. Perhaps it was built as an adaptive mechanism, perhaps as a trap, or as a map that updates itself. Local legends say that Ertalani was the place of star voices, and the elders claim that if you stand in the center of the Great Hall at midnight, you can hear a sound like the flapping of enormous wings. But there are no such creatures in the steppe, and this sound doesn't resemble wind or earthquakes. It's more like a low, drawn-out vibration, as if something heavy and slow were passing underground. Modern researchers note another phenomenon. On certain nights, the stars above the labyrinth appear brighter. It's as if the air between the ground and the sky becomes clearer, or as if something underground creates a faint, so-called window, allowing one to see the cosmos in a slightly different way. Could the Ertalana labyrinth have been created for astronomical observations? Yes, but the structure is too complex, too deep, too technologically advanced for a simple observatory. Another theory is far bolder. The creators may have used the labyrinth as a mechanism for interacting with earthly vibrations, or with celestial ones. If its structure is indeed linked to the constellation Draco, perhaps it was attuned to specific cosmic cycles, and now it's simply waiting out the right moment. But there's a theory that people prefer not to discuss out loud. The labyrinth wasn't built for people, and not by people. Its geometry is more biological than architectural. The corridors resemble neural pathways, not tunnels. The halls are hubs. And if you look at the structure as a whole, it truly does resemble the blueprint of something living. Today, access to the labyrinth is partially closed. Authorities attribute this to landslides and the risk of collapse, but those who have been inside say the labyrinth sometimes makes a sound, a low, barely audible one, as if it truly lives its own life underground, and something within it continues to function. Ayer Talani isn't just an ancient structure, it's a system, enormous, self-sufficient, and most likely still active. But the main question remains: what should it do when the time comes? Quintana Rock Gate. In northern Spain, where the mists descend so low they seem like living beings, lies a hidden place known only to a few villages. They call it Quintana, a word whose meaning has long been forgotten. Here, among the stone cliffs, stands an object that resembles neither ruins nor a natural arch, nor a portal from ancient legend. It is the wall, a vast, smooth, perfectly vertical surface, in the center of which a perfect doorway is carved. But the door leads nowhere. Beyond it lies only stone, and everything could be written off as an ancient, unfinished temple or monolith, were it not for one thing: this door is changing. The Quintana Wall is monumental. Standing almost as tall as a 5-story building, it appears to be part of the cliff itself, but the material is different from the surrounding rocks. It's darker, denser, and much smoother. The surface is smooth, as if shaped by a giant chisel, leaving a flawless plane. The only interruption to this surface is the portal, a rectangular opening as tall as a man, with lines so precise that modern engineers doubt they could have created something like it even today without laser processing. But beyond the opening there is no emptiness, no corridor, no shadow, but the same smooth stone, as if the door is closed, firmly, forever. The first thing the researchers noticed was that the opening was perfectly proportioned. Its sides correspond to ancient numerical ratios found in megaliths around the world. But Quintana's opening is unique in that it shows no signs of destruction or filling. The stone behind it is uniform, no seams, no joints. It's as if the interior surface is not part of the wall, but a separate material. Scanning revealed that the density of the stone inside the opening differed from that of the wall on either side. It was slightly denser, heavier. This led to the first hypothesis. This was an artificially created surface designed for movement. But if this was a door, where was the mechanism, and which way was it supposed to open? Then a second mystery emerged. At dawn, the surface inside the opening begins to glow faintly, a faint, barely perceptible glow, visible only at a certain angle. It lasts for several minutes, then disappears. Scientists attempted to explain it with an optical effect, but experiments showed that the glow does not originate from the sun. It comes from within the stone. It's as if something beneath the surface is reacting to the changing light and emitting energy. Another phenomenon occurs at night. If you stand in front of the opening long enough, the stone inside seems to pulse slightly. Not physically, but with light, as if its surface were becoming slightly darker, then slightly lighter. The rhythm is faint, almost imperceptible, but repetitive. Instruments have recorded a subtle change in the magnetic field, synchronous with this pulse. Whatever it is, it's working. Quietly, slowly, but it's working. Elders from nearby villages say that Quintana is the gate that poisoned the air. According to legend, in ancient times the door stood open, emitting cold smoke that caused birds to fall. People sealed the doorway with a stone and forbade anyone to approach the area. But the smoke legend is too ancient to be verified. And yet there is one anomaly in the Quintana area. There are no animals near the wall. Birds don't perch on the ledges. Insects don't swarm in the shade. Even moss and lichens rarely grow on the wall's surface, despite the ideal climate for them. One expedition attempted to take a sample of the stone inside the opening. The tools failed to leave a single scratch. The hardest drill simply glided as if on smooth metal. Then the researchers measured the stone's structure using acoustic waves. The result was unexpected. A cavity existed within the stone, narrow yet long, as if there were a space, a passage, a hall behind the wall. But the entrance was sealed by a monolithic slab several meters thick. If there really is a cavity there, why did they seal it? And why did they seal it so securely, as if they were afraid someone, or something, would get out? Another strange effect emerged during an attempt to conduct an electromagnetic scan. The devices began malfunctioning. The signal wasn't reflecting off the wall as it should have. It seemed to flow sideways, like water down a slope. This can only be explained by one thing. The wall's material has energy redirecting properties. And if so, the wall isn't just a monolith. It's part of a complex structure. A theory has emerged that the Quintan Gate is an ancient resonator, perhaps a device that worked with sound, perhaps with ground vibrations. If you strike the wall with a metal object, the sound is strange, dull, deep, as if emanating from a vast void. But when you try to repeat the strike, the sound changes. Sometimes it becomes higher, sometimes lower, as if the wall itself chooses how to react. The most disturbing observation was made by scientists working on the site overnight. They noticed that when a person approaches within 2 meters of the opening, the stone's pulsation intensifies, the magnetic field shifts, and the air becomes denser. It feels as if the wall is responding to its presence, as if something inside it senses the approach of a living being. There's a theory that the wall was created as a locking device, perhaps to keep something inside. But there's also an opposite theory. The wall wasn't designed to keep anything out, but to keep anyone from entering prematurely. The strangest event occurred several years ago. During a thunderstorm, lightning struck a nearby cliff. After the strike, the Quintana opening glowed brighter than usual. Thin, glowing lines, like cracks, appeared on the rock. But after a few minutes, the lines disappeared. After this incident, access to the area was temporarily closed. Officially, due to the risk of avalanche. Unofficially, because no one wanted a repeat. Locals claim that when there's a thick fog near the wall, the opening deepens. So much so that you can see the darkness beyond it. A darkness in which something seems to be moving. Scientists attribute this to a trick of the light, but those who have seen it with their own eyes say otherwise. The door was waiting, but not for us. Today, Quintana remains one of Europe's most terrifying and mysterious structures. It's too artificial to be natural, too solid to be ancient, too living to be dead. Ruins of Tonesi. On Iceland's rugged coast, where the wind cuts like a knife and the waves roar with a warning, there's a place spoken of only in whispers. It's called Tonesi, land of sound, though elders insist the word's true meaning has long been lost. There, amid black cliffs and perpetual fog, stand dozens of flat stone slabs thrusting into the ground at an angle. Their surface is covered with strange lines, not letters, not an ancient script, but something far more mysterious. These lines are called the Tonesi runes, but they aren't actually runes. They're traces of an unknown meaning, and many researchers believe they were written in an era before writing existed on Earth. The discovery was made by chance. Fishermen noticed a strange sheen among the rocks near the shore after a strong storm. A wave had pushed aside a layer of sand, revealing a smooth gray stone beneath, polished so perfectly it looked as if it had been scorched by heat. Its surface was covered with lines arranged at right and diagonal angles, forming a complex pattern. But the design was too geometric, too elaborate, to be ornamental. When archaeologists began excavating, they discovered hundreds of such slabs. They form what appear to be radial paths extending from the center of an invisible circle. But this circle is so large that it's impossible to see without aerial photography. The lines on the slabs run in a single direction, as if someone had walked across these stones, leaving a trail of energy behind. Each slab is unique. Some have straight lines, others wavy. Some form figures reminiscent of cross-sections of geometric solids. Others form map-like structures. But most astonishingly, these lines are uneven. They are burned deeper into the stone on one side, barely visible on the other. It's as if whoever created them had a tool capable of varying the force of their impact with perfect precision. Analysis revealed that the stone slabs are not native to the area. They are denser than basalt, but lighter than granite. Their structure resembles a mineral alloy that only forms under extreme pressure. But there are no places in Iceland where such conditions could occur naturally. Most importantly, the stone surface is impervious to erosion. Storms, salt water, and frost, nothing can destroy the lines. They look just as they did thousands of years ago. One of the strangest phenomena was discovered overnight. During a full moon, the lines on the slabs begin to glow softly. It's not a bright glow, but rather a faint luminescence, similar to a reflection of the moon, and it's present even when the moon is obscured by clouds. The light emanates from the deepest furrows. Scientists attempted to record the spectrum of the glow, but the instruments showed only noise. It's as if the light source isn't rays, but an unknown form of energy. There's a legend told by local fishermen. They say Tórsnesið was a place where voices from the heavens came. Once upon a time, at night, movements like music were heard in these places. But not human music. Rather, they were low, vibrating sounds that seemed to be born in the stones. They said, "The earth sings, but not for us." And although the legend sounds poetic, many believe it contains truth. During one expedition, researchers noticed a phenomenon that's difficult to describe. Standing between two slabs with lines forming a distinct pattern, one feels a sensation of pressure on the temples. It's slight, but distinct. It's as if the space around them is becoming denser. At the same time, a faint hum can be heard right in the head. Instruments detect low-frequency vibrations, but the source is unknown. The air is still, the stones don't move, but the vibration is there. Scientists have hypothesized that the Tórsnesið runes aren't a language, they're a technology, perhaps a system that once functioned. And the lines on the slabs are traces of its activation. Then the slabs themselves aren't stones, but elements of an ancient mechanism. And if so, it was enormous, so enormous that it encompassed an entire valley. But from what mechanism? Some believe it's a geophonic system, a device that interacts with the Earth's vibrations, perhaps predicting earthquakes. But the slabs are too old. And if they were an Earth observation instrument, why are they laid out geometrically correctly relative to the constellations and not relative to the Earth's crustal flows? Yes, the map of the slabs does indeed match one of the celestial patterns. The Pavo constellation is in its ancient configuration, but it's only visible in the southern sky, and Iceland is too far away. Does this mean the rune makers lived in a different time, at a different latitude? Or were they guided by stars we no longer see? An even more disturbing question is why the runes are constructed as if they were created to convey information. Some lines form sequences, reminiscent of binary structures. They are too ordered to be randomly drawn, too precise for artistic work, too stable for ordinary inscription. The most disturbing discovery was made recently. In one of the rows of slabs, they discovered a slab that lay not on the ground, but above it, by a few millimeters. It was hanging. Not high, literally the thickness of a fingernail. But it was hanging, and there was no void beneath it. Only a shadow, a very thin one, as if the stone were held in place by something invisible. When they tried to move the slab, it didn't budge, but it vibrated, very faintly, as if something inside it responded to the touch. Since then, the Tórsnesið site has been closed to the public. Officially, it's for the preservation of the historical site. But many believe the true reason is fear of activating a system no one understands. Because the Tonesi runes are not a message, not a recording, not decoration. They are a program, an encoded structure, perhaps a map, perhaps a device, perhaps traces of something that once tried to contact the world, or warn it. And if even one plate starts moving again, we will see for the first time what exactly it is trying to talk to. The flooded circle of Latam. Off the coast of the Philippines, where warm currents collide with the cold depths, there's a spot fishermen respect. They refer to it as the breathing circle. It doesn't appear on modern maps, but all the locals know the coordinates by heart. There, just a few kilometers from the shore, lies an object on the seabed whose origin neither archaeologists nor oceanographers have been able to explain. This is the Latam Circle, a perfect circle of stone monoliths that continue to function, although they were likely created thousands of years before the first seafarers. The discovery occurred by accident. Underwater hunters noticed a vibration in one spot in the water. It was very slight, so slight that it could only be felt by the skin. The current didn't change, the waves didn't get stronger, but the sensation was still there. When the researchers lowered their camera deeper, they saw a perfect circle. It was about 60 meters in diameter. The stones stood vertically, like giant teeth, each up to 3 times the height of a man. But most importantly, there was space between the stones and the sand. They weren't sitting on the bottom. They were suspended, not high, about 20 centimeters. But they were suspended. Underwater currents usually shift objects, but Latam's circle remained perfectly level. Not a single stone moved, not a single one tilted. It was as if they were anchored not in the ground, but in the water itself. When the researchers measured the stone's density, they discovered another oddity. The rock was neither volcanic nor sedimentary. It resembled an alloy of artificially created minerals with an unusually smooth structure. But most importantly, the stones were cold. Even at depth, where the water always maintains a stable temperature, the monoliths remained noticeably colder than the surrounding environment. This is only possible with internal cooling. In other words, the stones were working. The most mysterious part of the circle is its sound. If you swim close enough, you can hear a low, barely perceptible hum. It doesn't sound like animals or underwater currents. It's smooth and resonant, like a moving mechanism. The humming doesn't come from individual stones, but from the circle as a whole. It's as if the stones form a single system, each link of which maintains the vibration. When acoustic instruments attempted to record this sound, something unexpected happened. The recording was blank. The instruments detected vibrations, depth sensors showed deviations, but the microphones heard nothing. This meant only one thing. The sound existed, but not in the range we were accustomed to. It resonated not in the water, but in the very structure of the space around the circle. The most terrifying discovery was made several years ago. During a routine survey, the stones began to glow. It was a faint bluish tint, barely noticeable, but enough to be captured on camera. The light wasn't coming from the surface, it was emanating from within the monoliths. And the strangest thing, when the light appeared, the vibration intensified. Fishermen claim that after the nights of daylight, something strange changes in the sea. The water becomes calmer. The current slows. The fish leave these areas as if afraid of the ripples. And after a few days, everything returns to normal. There's a legend that Latam is the circle that holds back the water, that something happened here in ancient times that was meant to stop the sea. Perhaps an earthquake, perhaps an underwater rift, perhaps an influx of something from outside. The stones served as a boundary, a barrier. But if that's true, why do they continue to function? Some researchers believe that Latam's circle is a sonic beacon, a huge resonator that sends a signal over long distances. The only question is, to whom? And what exactly is it transmitting? Research has shown that the circle's vibrations are not random. They repeat at strictly regular intervals. Moreover, its frequency perfectly matches the resonance of an ocean trench located 100 kilometers from the circle. It's as if Lotham is communicating with something deep within. There's another, more frightening theory. The stones don't make sound, they receive it. The circle is a device for interpreting underwater vibrations. In other words, it listens, and what we perceive as a hum is actually a response to vibrations occurring deep within the ocean. If this is true, then someone has created a system capable of listening to the depths. But what are the depths? Ordinary geological processes? Vast underwater voids? Or something that has been living there for a long time and slowly? The most unsettling discovery was located in the center of the circle. A depression was discovered there, a nearly perfect bowl several meters in diameter. The bowl's bottom was polished so smoothly it seemed mirror-like, but most importantly, the surface vibrated slightly. Instruments detected a weak but stable energy emanating from below. Its source was not found, but the vibration matched the frequency of the stone monoliths. When the drone attempted to descend into the bowl, the connection was momentarily lost. The image was distorted, as if something had skewed the signal. When it was restored, short flashes of light were visible on the bowl's surface. Not bright, but too clear to be camera error. After this incident, access to Lotham was restricted. Scientists continue to debate. Is it an ancient mechanism that stopped the catastrophe? A lighthouse? A defense system? Or a means of communicating with what lies beneath the ocean? But everyone agrees on one thing. Lotham's circle isn't dead. It's working, and if it was created to warn, that means what it warned against may one day return. The city of Ulmasa on the Celestial Plate. High in the Bolivian Andes, where the air cuts your chest and cloud shadows move across the ground faster than a human step, lies a plateau locals call the Sky Plate. It's so flat that it seems artificial, and its edges drop off almost vertically, as if someone had lifted a chunk of earth and left it hanging over the abyss. Here, at an altitude of over 5,000 meters, amidst extraordinary silence, lie the ruins of the city of Ulmasa, the last and most difficult mystery on the list. Ulmasa is unlike any other ancient structure in South America. There are no familiar step temples, no plazas, no roads. The city is built as if its architects didn't care about gravity. The stones are at odd angles, the columns are thinner than they should be to support their own weight, and the walls are positioned in such a way as to seem to defy the very possibility of collapse. But they don't collapse. Ever. The first thing that strikes you is the material. The Ulma stones resemble light-colored basalt, but their structure is different. They are much denser than the local rocks, yet lighter. You can push them, and they vibrate slightly, as if they were hollow. Some walls emit a quiet hum when you run your hand over them. This hum is too low to be perceived as sound. It's more like a feeling on the skin. Locals claim that the city breathes at night. At certain times, a thin, misty haze appears on the slabs. It doesn't rise, doesn't move, doesn't dissipate. It seems to flow deep into the stone walls. On these nights, the animals leave the plateau. The shepherds close their shutters, and only the elders look at the celestial slab and whisper, "Ulmasa remembers." When explorers first climbed here, they found a structure that completely defied terrestrial physics. Some stone pillars stood on bases whose area was less than half the area of their upper portions. In other words, their center of gravity was off-center. But the pillars didn't fall. Even strong winds that blow away tents and rip clothing didn't cause them to tremble. It was as if something invisible were holding them up. The most mysterious part of Ulmas is its main slab. In the center of the city lies a gigantic stone slab, perfectly flat, just a few dozen centimeters thick. But beneath it lies a void. Laser scans reveal a hollow space beneath the slab, geometrically precise, like a huge rectangular hall, some 5 meters deep. But there's no entrance, no holes, no cracks, no hidden passages. The slab lies like the lid of a gigantic coffin, concealing something that shouldn't see the light. When the researchers tried tapping the slab, the sound wasn't stone-like, but metallic. A hollow, hollow sound, as if beneath the surface there wasn't a void, but a vast responsive structure. One geologist described it this way: "I was tapping on the stone, but it felt like I was tapping on the hull of a ship." But what kind of ship could be buried in a mountain at an altitude of 5,000 meters? Another anomaly is the behavior of light. At certain times of the day, especially in the morning, shadows in Ulmasa appear to be cast in the wrong direction. As soon as a person passes the columns, their shadow splits into two. Sometimes it disappears completely. Sometimes it casts at an angle incompatible with the sun's light. It feels as if space on the celestial plate is slightly warped, as if an invisible lens were influencing the rays. Some researchers have suggested that the material of the walls exerts a weak gravitational effect. This sounds like science fiction, but calculations have shown that the mass of the slabs is too small for such stability. They should collapse, but they don't. It's as if something compensates for gravity, allowing the buildings to stand as if they were created in another world, where the laws are different. The most eerie part of Ulmas is the corridors that don't exist. In several places, if you listen closely, you can hear a sound like footsteps, rhythmic, slow, as if someone were walking through empty halls. But there is no hall, only a stone wall. Sometimes the sound comes from under the main slab, sometimes from the other side of the city, and each time it's the same, as if repeating a cycle unknown to humans. Legend has it that Ulmasa wasn't a city, but a refuge, a place where heavenly stones descended from on high. Ancient peoples said that at night enormous glowing structures resembling temples would land on the slab. They didn't build Ulmasa, but used it as a platform. And when their time was up, they departed. But the platform remained, to wait. This legend seems like a fairy tale, but one discovery forced scientists to reconsider their doubts. Traces of melting were found on one of the columns. The stone at this point flowed like wax, but the temperature required to melt this rock must exceed anything possible in the natural conditions of the Andes. Even stranger, the melting occurred from top to bottom. That is, the heat source was not inside the column, but above it. But there was no volcano, no fire, no meteorite nearby. Another discovery was made during a nighttime laser scan. The slab trembled momentarily. The camera recorded a microscopic, barely noticeable movement. The slab rose a fraction of a millimeter, then sank. The instrument showed a burst of low-frequency vibration, matching the spectrum of vibrations emitted by several underground structures on the other side of the city. So the entire city reacted, synchronously. This gave rise to a disturbing hypothesis. Ulmasa isn't ruins. It's a mechanism, and it's still running, perhaps in a minimal mode, perhaps in standby mode, but it's running. Modern researchers believe the celestial slab may be part of a giant observatory, or a platform capable of interacting with atmospheric fields, or, even more frightening, a device that once rose into the air along with the entire structure. If so, Ulmasa is a remnant of technology lost by a civilization that manipulated stone and gravity the way we work with metal and wires. Locals put it differently. The slab awaits those who know its name. They are certain that one day the city will fully come to life. When is unknown, but the fact that the vibrations beneath the slab repeat every few years suggests one thing: the mechanism is not broken. And if one day Ulmasa breathes again with full strength, then we will see not a city, but something that should not have remained on Earth. The world hides far more than we're accustomed to thinking. Beneath sand, ice, water, and stone dwell structures that defy history or the laws of nature. They seem to have been created by those who understood matter differently, more deeply, more precisely. We see only traces, echoes, reflections of bygone civilizations. But the main thing remains. all these structures continue to wait, and it's possible that one day they will speak first.